You've made it to the final stage. The interviews went well. The compensation conversation feels aligned. The background check email hits your inbox. And then a quiet thought enters your mind. Who are they really calling? Not the 3 references you carefully selected, not the former manager who promised to say great things, but the people you didn't list. The people you may not even know they know. At the senior professional level, reference checks are not always procedural. They are political, they are relational, and sometimes they happen quietly. Today, I'm going to walk you through what a formal reference check actually looks like, what an informal backdoor reference really is, who hiring managers actually call, and how to protect your narrative at these senior levels. Because here's the truth. You cannot control who they talk to, but you can control the story that travels ahead of you. And that's what strategic professionals understand. If you're a senior professional navigating high-stakes hiring decisions, this channel is built specifically for you. We don't just talk about resumes. We break down the invisible evaluation systems happening behind the scenes, the ones most people never explain. Subscribe if you want clarity before the stakes get higher. Now, here's where most professionals misunderstand what's happening. They assume a reference check is procedural, scripted, controlled, but at the senior professional level, it becomes relational. And relational evaluation operates very differently because once the stakes rise, the evaluation expands. For those of you who are new here, my name is Chuks Agada. I'm an executive career strategist and former corporate recruiter. I've led talent acquisition functions and participated directly in high-stakes leadership searches across industries. I've conducted formal reference checks, and I've also been a part of the informal ones. And what I can tell you calmly and clearly is this. At senior levels, reference checks are not primarily about verifying dates of employment. They're about reducing risk. The higher the role, the more visible the position, the more strategic the impact, and the greater the internal anxiety about getting it wrong. So when an organization hires a mid-level contributor, the risk is operational. But when they hire a director, VP, or a C-suite leader, the risk becomes more strategic, financial, cultural, board visible. A misaligned executive can shift morale, disrupt strategy, create turnover, expose the company publicly, damage investor confidence, and those consequences don't stay quiet. So the hiring conversation changes. It moves from, can this person do the job, to, are we confident in this person under pressure? That shift is subtle, but it's critical. And when confidence becomes the central question, hiring managers begin using every signal available to them. Formal references, informal conversations, network insight, pattern recognition. Not because they're trying to trap you, but because uncertainty makes leaders uncomfortable. And when uncertainty increases, evaluation expands. That's the part most candidates never see. And when you don't understand that expansion, you may misinterpret what's happening in the final stage. You may assume something went wrong, when in reality, something went deeper. So today, we're not going to talk about reference checks at the surface level. We're going to break down what actually happens, the formal process, the informal process, and the quiet relational calls that sometimes carry the most weight. Because once you understand the structure, you stop fearing the mystery. And strategic professionals never operate in mystery. Now let's start with what most professionals are familiar with, the formal reference check. This is the part that feels structured, predictable, official. And in many cases, it is. A formal reference check is typically conducted by a third-party background screening company, an internal HR professional, or sometimes the recruiter managing the search. And the process is usually procedural. There's a script, there are compliance guardrails, there are documented notes, At this stage, the goal is not to explore personality rumors or industry gossip. The goal is verification, confirmation, alignment between what you said and what can be substantiated. Most formal reference checks focus on employment dates, title confirmation, scope of responsibility, performance summary, leadership style, eligibility for rehire. At some senior levels, the questions may go slightly deeper. How did this person handle pressure? How did they navigate conflict? What was their impact on culture? But even then, the structure remains intact. It's documented, it's controlled, it's professional, and importantly, it is usually based on the references you selected. And of course, that matters because you choose those individuals. You likely prep them. You selected people who understand your impact and can articulate it clearly. And because of that, formal reference checks tend to come back strong, not because they're inflated, but because you were strategic. Now, here's something many senior professionals don't realize. At large organizations, formal reference checks are often viewed as a final compliance checkpoint, not the primary decision driver. By the time formal references are called, in many cases, the hiring manager already wants you. The interviews align, the compensation conversation progressed, internal stakeholders have signaled support. So the formal reference check becomes confirmation, not exploration. That's why in many senior professional searches, formal references rarely derail the candidacy unless there is a major discrepancy or a red flag. And when something does raise concern in a formal reference, it's usually because there was a misrepresentation or there was a clear performance issue that contradicts the narrative presented. But here's the key distinction. Formal reference checks are visible. You know they're happening, you know who is being contacted, and you understand the framework. That visibility provides psychological comfort. It feels controlled, and most professionals stop their analysis there. They assume, if my references are solid, I'm covered. And at many levels of hiring, that assumption holds. But at senior levels, that's only one layer of evaluation. And once you understand that it's just one layer, you begin preparing differently. Now we move into the part that most professionals sense, but rarely understand clearly, the informal reference. Sometimes people call this a backdoor reference, and I don't love that phrase because it sounds dramatic, but what it really means is simple. A hiring manager leveraging their network, and this happens more frequently at senior levels for one reason. The higher you rise, the smaller your industry becomes. Senior professionals and executive talent pools are not massive. They overlap. Board members sit on multiple boards. Former colleagues scatter across competitors. Private equity partners circulate within tight ecosystems. Recruiters and CHROs move between organizations. At senior levels, the world shrinks. So when a hiring manager is evaluating a director, VP, or a C-suite candidate, they often ask very quiet questions. Who do I know? Who knows this person? And sometimes that question leads to a quick email, a text message, a 5-minute phone call. It's rarely formal. There's no script, there's no documented questionnaire, no compliance checklist. It sounds more like, hey, you used to be at company X, right? Do you happen to know Chuks Agada? What was your experience? That's it. Short, relational, context-based. And here's the nuance that matters. These conversations are rarely about verifying your resume. They're about pattern recognition. They're not asking, did this person work there from 2018 to 2022? They're asking, what was it like working with them? Did they create stability? Did they build trust? Would you hire them again? At senior levels, those questions carry weight because technical competence is assumed. You don't get to final stage interviews if you lack competence. What's being evaluated now is risk, temperament, leadership, presence, reputational consistency. And here's the part that creates anxiety. You won't know exactly who was called. You won't know exactly what was said, and you won't see documentation. That invisibility is what unsettles most people. But invisibility does not mean hostility. It means relational due diligence. Now, let me say something important from experience. These calls are not usually fishing expeditions for dirt. They're calibration tools. Hiring managers are asking themselves, is what I experienced in the interview consistent with how this person shows up over time? They're looking for alignment, consistency, signal. And when feedback aligns with what they've already observed, confidence rises dramatically. When feedback contradicts what they've observed, that's when the process slows down. Not always stop, but slows. And here's the reality most people don't talk about. You cannot prevent a hiring manager from leveraging their network, especially if they have strong industry relationships. There is no policy that says they must only call your listed references. And at senior levels, relational capital is part of how decisions are made, not maliciously, not secretly, but practically. And once you understand that this layer exists, you stop assuming everything is happening inside the formal framework. Because at senior professional and executive levels, evaluation becomes layered: formal, informal, visible, invisible. And strategic professionals prepare for both. Now, let's stabilize something. When people hear informal references, their mind goes straight to the worst case scenario. They're digging for dirt, or someone must be saying something negative. This feels unfair. But in most senior professional level searches, that's not what's happening. Informal references are rarely about hunting for flaws. They're about confirming alignment. At senior levels, hiring decisions carry real consequences. A misaligned executive doesn't just miss targets. They can destabilize teams, trigger turnover, create strategic confusion. So hiring managers are looking for signal, not scandal. They're asking, is this person consistent? Does their reputation match their interview presence? Would trusted peers work with them again? That's it. And here's something important from experience. I've seen formal references come back average, but informal conversations confirm strong leadership presence, and the offer move forward. I've also seen the opposite, where formal references were glowing, but informal feedback raised concerns about collaboration style or internal politics. In those cases, processes didn't always end immediately. Sometimes the candidate was asked directly, given space to clarify, which is why your narrative matters. If there was a short tenure, an involuntary exit, a difficult board relationship, it's not the imperfection that hurts you. It's the surprise when your story is clean, calm, and consistent. Informal conversations lose their power to destabilize you because alignment reduces risk. And senior professional and executive hiring is fundamentally about risk calibration, not perfection. If this conversation is helping you see the process more clearly, take a moment and tap the like button. It helps this video reach other senior professionals navigating high-stakes decisions, and many of them are thinking about this quietly. And I'm genuinely curious, when you think about someone informally asking about you, what concerns you most? Is it a former manager, a peer at your level, a board member, or simply not knowing who might be contacted? Drop it in the comments. You're not the only one who's had that thought, even if nobody talks about it openly. Now, can informal references change the outcome? Short answer, yes, but not in the dramatic way people imagine. Informal references rarely create sudden explosions. They create shifts in confidence, and senior professional level hiring runs on confidence. If informal feedback aligns with what the hiring team has already observed, confidence rises, momentum increases, offers move faster. If informal feedback conflicts with what the hiring team experienced in interviews, confidence dips. The process slows. More conversations happen internally. Sometimes you're asked clarifying questions. Occasionally, the team reconsiders. But here's the key. At senior levels, it's rarely about one comment. It's about patterns. Hiring managers are not making decisions off a single emotional opinion. They're listening for consistency across signals: interview performance, track record, formal references, informal feedback. Reputation echoes. When all of that aligns, the offer feels safe. When it doesn't, uncertainty grows. And uncertainty is expensive at senior professional and executive levels. Now, here's something else most people don't think about. If a hiring manager deeply trusts the person giving the informal feedback, that opinion carries weight. That's not unethical. That's relational capital. And relational capital is part of executive decision-making. But here's the empowering side of this. You also have relational capital. Your reputation compounds over time. The way you exited organizations, the way you handled conflict, the way you treated peers, subordinates, and boards, all of that travels ahead of you. So yes, informal references can influence outcomes, but they are rarely random. They reflect patterns you've already created, and patterns are built long before the final interview. So let me leave you with this. Senior professionals in executive hiring is layered. There is the visible process, and then there is the relational process. Formal systems, informal systems, structured evaluation, invisible evaluation. And none of that is designed to trap you. It's designed to reduce uncertainty. When organizations are hiring at senior levels, they are not just hiring competence, they are hiring judgment, stability, reputational safety, and long-term trust. That's why evaluation expands as responsibility expands. Now, here's the part that should calm you. If you have operated with integrity, if you have built real relationships, if you have handled transitions professionally, informal references are not something to fear. They're something your career has already prepared you for. You cannot control every conversation, but you can control the patterns you leave behind. And hiring managers are not looking for perfection. They are looking for consistency. Does this person show up the same way over time? Does their reputation match their presence? Does their story align with their track record? When those things are aligned, confidence rises. And executive hiring runs on confidence. So instead of worrying about who they might call, focus on something more powerful. Is your narrative clean? Is your leadership pattern consistent? Are you leaving organizations in a way that strengthens your long-term capital? Because reputation is not built in the final stage. It's built across your career. And by the time you're in executive conversations, your patterns are already speaking. That's not pressure, that's perspective. If you're navigating senior professional or executive level conversations and want deeper insight into how these invisible evaluation systems actually work, I share more strategic breakdowns like this in my weekly newsletter. It's written specifically for senior professionals who want clarity before the stakes get higher. The link is in the description, subscribe there, and I'll continue helping you prepare for what most people only discover too late. Now, if this conversation clarified how references really work, you need to understand what employers are actually seeing during the background check itself. In my video, What Can Employers Ask During a Background Check?, I break down what shows up and what doesn't, because many senior professionals are worrying about things that never appear and overlooking the ones that actually influence decisions. Watch that one next. It connects directly to this conversation and gives you the complete picture of how final stage evaluation really works. And finally, if you like this video, be sure to subscribe and comment below. See you next time. Over and out.